SOS, a stranded voice on a hidden tape. In the summer of 1989, a Japanese police helicopter flying over the dense wilderness of Mount Asahi spotted something strange on the forest floor. An enormous SOS, perfectly shaped, unmistakable, built from 19 birch trees, each 5 meters long. A desperate cry for help carved into the landscape. But when rescuers reached the site, no one was there. Just bones, a makeshift grave, a cassette recorder, and a voice on tape, still pleading to be saved. Days earlier, 2 men had gone missing while hiking through Daisetsuzan National Park in northern Japan. The terrain here is brutal, with deep bamboo grass, steep cliffs, and sudden whiteouts. Rescuers scoured the slopes with helicopters until they spotted the giant SOS marker. Just a few kilometers north, they found the missing hikers, alive and disoriented, but unharmed. The rescue was celebrated, until the hikers were asked, "Did you build the sign?" They hadn't. Search teams returned to the SOS site, hoping to find someone else still alive. What they found instead made headlines across Japan. Scattered human remains, skeletal, partly buried, marked by animal predation. Bite marks, bones broken in ways that suggested the injuries occurred before death. Near the bones, a narrow hole in the earth, barely wide enough to crawl into. Inside, a backpack, cassette tapes, a recorder, a skull, and the photo ID of Kenji Iwamura, a man who'd vanished 5 years earlier. The conclusion seemed obvious, until it wasn't. One cassette held a 2-minute, 17-second recording. A man's voice, panicked and exhausted, cried out, quote, "SOS, help me. I can't move off the cliff. The Sasa is deep, and I can't get up. Lift me up from here." The location described, deep in bamboo grass, matched the site. But when the audio was played for Iwamura's parents, they said the voice wasn't his. Experts couldn't confirm it either. To this day, no one knows who made the recording. Other tapes were filled with cheerful music from anime series like Macross and Magical Princess Minky Momo. One cassette case had even been decorated with a hand-cut image of the cartoon heroine's face. It got stranger. Investigators later found that the SOS marker had appeared in aerial photographs taken 2 years earlier, in 1987. The sign had been visible, clearly, for more than 700 days. Someone had called for help. No one came. At first, pathologists said the skeleton was female. But in 1990, a quiet reanalysis revealed it was male, casting doubt on everything investigators thought they knew. Was it Kenji Iwamura after all? If so, there was a problem. The bones showed signs of starvation. Whoever died there was too weak to drag and arrange 19 heavy birch trunks into a signal. So who built it, and where did they go? More than 40 years later, no confirmed remains of Kenji Iwamura have ever been found, only his ID. If the bones weren't his, he may still be alive. If they were, then someone else was up there, strong enough to carry logs. What if you came across something completely out of place on the trail? Something that made you stop and sense the unknown. Sometimes it's not what you see that triggers your instincts, it's what you smell. A shift in the air, a new scent, can change your whole perspective. That's the power of fragrance. And lately I've been exploring it through Scentbird, a monthly subscription that lets you choose from over 900 authentic designer and niche fragrances. Each month, you get an 8-milliliter vial, about 120 sprays, plenty to see how a scent works for you in different situations. Spray on your pulse points, like wrists and neck, to make the scent last longer. For just $8 your first month and $16.95 after, you can explore high-end fragrances that usually cost $300 or more per bottle. With the freedom to switch scents each month, you skip the commitment and the cost of full-size bottles. This month, I've been wearing Cherry Punk by Room 1015. It's like walking through a dusky alley after a night out, leather jacket on, the air full of cherry, violet, and just a hint of the unknown. Then there's Versace Eros, a minty, clean blast that settles into warm cedar. It's got a confident, modern adventurer vibe, perfect for hikes or nights out. And when I want to feel like I own the trail, it's Wall Street by Who is Elijah, a smoky rose oud with incense that lingers like a ghost story around a campfire. With Scentbird, you can build a fragrance wardrobe that fits your season, your mood, or your next unexplained adventure. Scan the QR code or use promo code DARK5 to get 55% off your first month at Scentbird. You can get your first fragrance for just $8, and the next month will be only $16.95. Again, that's DARK and the number 5. Now, back to the trail. The Kamar Deban incident. In August 1993, 6 young hikers collapsed screaming on the slopes of Siberia's Kamar Deban Mountains. Blood fell from their eyes and ears. One tore at her clothes, another seized violently before going still. By the time rescuers arrived weeks later, their bodies were scattered like chess pieces across the tundra. The only survivor was a teenage girl, barefoot, mute with shock, and covered in cuts, wandering alone through the forest. She couldn't explain what had happened, and no one else could either. The trip had seemed routine. Lyudmila Kovarina, a seasoned survival instructor with years of mountain experience, led 6 students, aged 15 to 24, up the trail toward Khan Ula, a high ridge near Lake Baikal. The group moved fast. Too fast, some later said. They reached Transliator Peak ahead of schedule, despite high elevation and dense forest. That pace may have planted the seeds of disaster. On the descent, a sudden storm stopped them. Kovarina made a questionable call: camp on an exposed slope where they were unable to light a fire. Soaked and freezing, they pressed on the next morning, walking straight into a far deadlier trap. It started without warning. Alexander Kreisen, a strong 23-year-old, began stumbling at the rear of the line. Blood streamed from his ears. He collapsed, thrashing violently, then went still. Koravina ran to help, but seconds later, she too screamed, clutched her head, and fell. Victoria Filipenko tried to run, but dropped suddenly, cracking her head on a rock. 2 more, Tatiana Zelasova and Timur Bapanov, choked, clawed at their clothes, and fell convulsing. In minutes, 5 were dead or dying. Only 2 were left, Valentina Udachenko and 1 other student. Both fled in separate directions, but when Valentina looked back, her last companion was already on the ground. For 4 days, Valentina wandered alone, barefoot and hungry. Her voice was gone. She drank from streams. She followed power lines, bleeding from cuts she couldn't remember getting. Kayakers found her on a riverbank, mute, frightened, and pointing back toward the mountain. Yet inexplicably, police waited 3 weeks to launch a search. When they finally arrived, the scene deepened the mystery. Bodies were twisted, half-dressed, and stacked in ways that make no sense. The official cause of death: hypothermia for 5 and a heart attack for Koravina. But veteran rescuers who saw the scene firsthand rejected that immediately. Quote, "It wasn't cold enough," one insisted. Something else happened. Tests revealed disturbing clues. All of the climbers had fluid-filled lungs. Their muscles showed signs of massive protein loss, common in starvation, but the trip was only 6 days long and well stocked with food, and none of it explained the bleeding or convulsions. The evidence didn't line up with hypothermia. It did line up with something much more alarming. Some investigators began to consider a new possibility: nerve agents. The symptoms: seizures, frothing at the mouth, and disorientation eerily resembled exposure to Novichok, the Soviet-era chemical weapon infamous for its speed and subtlety. The Kamar Deban region wasn't far from areas used for military testing in the early 90s. In Lake Baikal, the watershed feeding the team's water source, was a known dumping ground for toxic waste. Could they have drunk poisoned water? or stumbled through a contaminated zone the government never admitted existed. There were other theories, too. Sudden altitude sickness, contaminated mushrooms, even panic triggered by low-frequency infrasound from the mountain itself. But none explained everything. None erased the final image. A barefoot girl, alone in the forest, walking away from a mystery that science still can't solve. Wolfman Photograph. Near the ruins of a forgotten castle in Germany's Harz Mountains, two hikers raised their camera and caught something impossible. An unclothed man, crouched in the bush, gripping a crude spear. He was waiting, staring, and then he vanished. The figure was covered in dirt and tangled hair, his body lean and weathered. When they first spotted him, he'd been sifting sand through his fingers like he was performing a ritual. The press dubbed him Der Wolfsmensch, the Wolfman. Experts believe he's in his 40s, but this wasn't the first sighting. For more than 5 years, reports have trickled out of the forest. Strange growls, shadowy figures, eyes reflecting in the dark. Police have launched drone searches, but the man always slips away, leaving behind only fire pits, stick shelters, and silence. The Harz Mountains are no stranger to legends. This is the land that gave the Brothers Grimm their darkest tales of witches, wild men, and vanishing children. At its heart looms the Brocken, a peak so often shrouded in fog it creates a haunting illusion called the Brocken Spectre, where a person's shadow is magnified into a towering ghost. Some say the stories of monsters and demons began with this optical trick, but the hiker's photo was no illusion. Not far from the photo's location lie the ruins of Regenstein Castle, perched above ancient sandstone tunnels, some military, some far older. Hikers still claim to hear footsteps echoing beneath their feet. Some believe the Wolfman uses the tunnels to move unseen. And the mountain holds darker secrets still. During the Cold War, the Soviets built a sealed listening post atop the Brocken. Codenamed Urian, it was wrapped in barbed wire and rumor. Radio signals intercepted, experiments conducted, entrances hidden. But even stranger were the Nazis. In the 1930s, Heinrich Himmler seized nearby Kedlenberg Abbey. He stripped out the Christian symbols and replaced them with pagan runes. By torchlight, SS recruits knelt in the crypt and swore oaths, not to God, but to the old gods. Himmler believed the Harz Mountains were sacred ground, haunted by ancient forces still sleeping beneath the soil. Some now wonder if those ancient powers were ever truly buried. And if not, what did the hikers actually see in the woods that day? Ghost towers. They weren't supposed to be there. In the winter of 2023, a hiker bushwhacking through the snow-covered peaks above Salt Lake City stopped dead in his tracks. There, bolted into the stone at over 7,000 feet, stood a strange tower, topped with a solar panel anchored by a thick metal box and humming with silent purpose. Then came the second one, then a third. Within weeks, a hidden network began to emerge, each device planted in some of the most rugged, remote corners of the Utah wilderness. The towers weren't just dropped off, they were installed, bolted into bare rock. Some weighed nearly 60 pounds. Whoever placed them had hiked them in by hand, often through snow and ice, and used industrial tools to lock them into place. No one saw them coming. No one saw them leave. Officials were baffled. No government agency claimed responsibility. No company stepped forward. And yet, the towers kept multiplying. The Salt Lake City Public Lands Department began organizing retrieval teams, 5-person crews with climbing gear, snowshoes, and heavy-duty drills, just to remove a single unit. But the effort became a losing battle. At first, there were 2 devices. By the time spring arrived, there were 12. And still they were coming. No one knew who was building the network, but someone was funding it. Each rig had a router, a power supply, and solar charging, all carefully designed to operate off-grid. Some believed it was a helium hotspot network, using high-altitude radios to claim rewards from a blockchain that pays users for wireless coverage. Others saw a darker purpose. Ham radio experts noted that the gear could be configured to run the Amateur Radio Emergency Data Network, a low-bandwidth mesh designed to survive grid collapse. More conspiratorial voices claimed the network could serve as cartel comm relays or prepper messaging systems, invisible to cell towers and immune to shutdown. None of these theories explain why someone would build a dozen such nodes and spread them across national parks, university property, and backcountry peaks. The only thing we know for sure, they haven't stopped. And the question is no longer just who's building them. It's what happens when they're finally connected. The man in the shack. They say if you hike too far off trail on Mount Baldy, you might see him before he sees you. But if he does see you, you better run. Hikers whispered about him for years, a shadowy figure pacing Morton Peak Trail, throwing bottles, blocking paths, telling people they didn't belong. Most thought it was just one of the mountain's scary stories. Until January 12th, 2025. That day, 5 hikers burst out of the woods in a panic. They told deputies a wild-eyed man had swung a sledgehammer at them, screaming, refusing to let them pass. They ran until they found a cell phone signal, and the pattern became clear. This wasn't a one-off. It was escalating. The man's name was Patrick Michael Flynn, age 66. Police say he'd been living off-grid for years in a hidden shack dangerously close to the trail. He stalked hikers, through broken glass, chased one man so far into the brush he had to call 911 while hiding under leaves. And his hideout, even more disturbing. Built from scavenged wood and lashed together with wire, the structure sat on the decaying foundation of a 1930s summer camp, once used by utility workers. It was nearly invisible from the trail. Flynn had run PVC pipes up from a nearby creek to pipe in water. Inside were food supplies, makeshift furniture, and personal effects, suggesting he'd lived there for years. How long? That depends who you ask. Some locals claim the first sightings go back to 2012. Others say his family lost contact with him around 2017 and assumed he'd disappeared. If true, that means Flynn may have been hiding on Baldy for over a decade, watching hikers from the trees. Then came May 16th. A woman hiking alone says he stepped into her path with a thick tree branch raised over his head. When she tried to flee, he lunged. She escaped. This time, deputies were ready. Flynn was arrested and charged with 5 counts of criminal threats and 1 felony count of false imprisonment. Authorities called him, quote, extremely dangerous, violent. But even with Flynn behind bars, some hikers say they still see movement in the trees near the trail, and they're starting to wonder, was he really alone out there? Before you hit the trail, don't forget the QR code or use promo code DARK5 to get 55% off your first month of Scentbird. That's just $8 to start. Which of these 5 mysteries do you think has the most terrifying explanation? Let me know in the comments. As always, thank you for watching Dark 5. Like and subscribe to continue exploring the greatest mysteries of this world and beyond.